capital of the empire. The entire secular society was suddenly bursting with rumors. The main culprit of the rumors always turned out to be a woman. The only sister of the current emperor and the only Grand Duchess in the empire, Olivia Ellington. She always behaved eccentrically. Instead of drinking tea with her friends, she preferred the company of sweaty knights. And at some point, instead of dresses, she began to wear pants and walk with a sword. There were rumors about Olivia's slave lover. He was wild and like an animal. Society was interested in whether it was true or false. The princess's birthday was approaching, so a ball would be held at the imperial palace, and the Grand Duchess herself, who was not easy to see, would be there. Imperial Palace, day of the ball. The herald announced Her Great Highness Duchess Olivia Ellington. Those present were amazed by her dress, and especially the cutout at the back. The Duchess was accompanied by a man of extraordinary beauty, unknown to everyone. People whispered whether this was the same slave, but he had no tail and his ears were pierced. Olivia left her companion for a short time to greet the emperor. As soon as she left, the attitude of those around him towards the man changed sharply for the worse. He stood on the balcony with a glass of wine and thought how good and calm it was now, because there was not a soul nearby, and no one looked at him with a condemning look. His peace was disturbed by a girl who came onto the balcony. She saw a glass in his hands and asked him to try whatever it was. The man handed her a glass. Before she could take a sip, the girl's nanny burst in and forbade her to take, let alone drink, anything from the hands of strangers. The little girl thought that he was a prince, and there was a foreign drink in his glass. The nanny took her away without giving her a chance to explain everything. The hall again burst into gossip. Everyone began to discuss the prince who had arrived from a distant country. Olivia returned to her companion. She saw part of the scene and thought it was cute. The girl was her niece named Lily. The Duchess explained that he was called the prince because of her. Olivia said that he was a prince who fled from a distant country because he was falsely accused while there was a struggle for the throne. So Prince Caleb got to their empire to hide from his pursuers. According to her legend, the prince is going to kill his uncle and stage a rebellion, regaining his throne, and she, for the sake of justice, helps the prince and plans to participate in the war as an ally. Olivia laughed and assured her companion not to worry, because anyway her niece would not believe that he was a real prince. She just liked to fantasize. Caleb said that if the girl found out that he was a slave, she would not be pleased. But the Duchess reassured him. The Duchess publicly kissed her companion, and those present froze with their mouths open in surprise. Having finished all her business in the palace, the Duchess said that it was time for them to go home. Caleb loved it very much when she said the word home. Duchess's palace. Getting ready for bed, she stroked the panther lying on her bed. The animal woke up. Olivia stroked his neck and went to bed. In 1 second, the animal turned into a man. It was Caleb. He hugged the Duchess tightly. When she stroked his scars, she remembered their first meeting, what happened in the past. In the capital of the empire, there is a place called the Green Estate. It looks like an ancient castle from fairy tales and rises majestically against the backdrop of a green forest. This estate has the richest history among all the mansions of the imperial family. It was often stayed, but no one lived here all their lives. This place belonged to the emperor for a long time. It had no other owners, with the exception of one person, Olivia Ellington. Since the very morning, the Duchess had a severe headache. She refused to call a doctor. She just wanted to be alone. But her desire was violated by Milady Scarlet, who arrived at her palace. Having met, the girls began to hug. They were glad to see each other. Scarlet brought the gift to the Duchess as soon as she saw it at the auction. At that hour, she thought about Olivia, so she immediately named a high price and won. Her Highness was dumbfounded. In front of her was a slave. As soon as my lady saw him at the auction, she remembered that the Duchess does not have a slave, and they are quite a useful thing. If tamed, he can withstand 3 trained knights, so he is well suited for the role of a bodyguard. If a slave is not tamed as a child, it will be impossible to use him as a subordinate, because an adult slave who does not love his master will not serve faithfully. Olivia didn't have time to say anything when Scarlet said that she had to go. The road took an incredibly long time, and she still had a meeting ahead. She left. The Duchess did not know what to do. Selling and buying slaves in the empire was not considered illegal, however. Not everything that is within the law is correct. The butler offered to send him back, but Olivia ordered him to be washed and placed on the bed first, and the cage thrown away. Dr. Faith Young did everything necessary. She said that the wounds would heal in 2 or 3 days. The scars remained because scars and cuts appeared in the same place hundreds of times. The Duchess decided not to send him back, since in this case he would again become a slave and be treated even worse than before. She decided to let him go as soon as he recovered. Faith Young said that perhaps he does not have a home, since he was caught. It means his home was seized, and returning to such a place is the same as voluntarily surrendering to slave traders. And perhaps he initially did not have a homeland and home. He could have been born into a family slaves. Olivia didn't know what to do. She couldn't leave him with her because the slave was quite young, and she was not old enough to be his parents. Faith Young was a doctor to the slaves, so she understood them. He was not young. He looked like a boy, but in fact, he was at least 20 years old. The girl couldn't believe that this kid was 20 years old. When he meets a partner and becomes an adult, he will most likely look like a normal person. Then he will be able to go outside without the risk of being caught again, the doctor concluded. Prisoners, regardless of age, have ears and a tail, like animals, or some physical features that ordinary people do not have. Not everyone is like this, but perhaps in this case it is because this child belongs to the Karen tribe. They are a very rare species, and even Faith Young had no information on them, and even more rare were those with dark skin. The time was late, and Faith Young had to go. She promised to try to find people who could protect and accept this slave. Olivia spent the night by the slave's bed. The next day, the Duchess's estate. The room was in disarray. The slave was sitting on the closet, angry. As soon as you said something to him, he immediately began to grin. Olivia came up to him and tried to explain that no one would harm him here, but they only wanted to feed him. The Duchess continued that she is the mistress here and is not going to keep him as a slave, so she called a doctor to heal the wounds, and if he wants, she is ready to let him go if he comes down and apologizes to everyone. The slave turned away, lay down, and spoiled the air in the room. Olivia ordered the place to be cleaned up and to continue the daily cleaning, but not to give any food or water to the slave until he asked, and so a small war began. The slave broke furniture, tore expensive curtains. Either he was too hardy or stubborn in character, or maybe all at once, causing chaos every hour. There were traces of blood in the room. The slave broke a pot and injured himself. It was worth helping him, but he did not let anyone near him. A window in the mansion was broken, but an ordinary person could not do it. The windows in the mansion are made of high-quality crystal. They even have a magic spell on them. Olivia was amazed. After such turmoil, the slave must have spent a lot of effort, but still hasn't asked for anything. The Duchess was informed that the child was missing. She thought that he was hiding somewhere because he was hungry and would return soon, but he had not drunk anything for 4 days. If a person does not drink anything for 4 days, then health problems will appear. The courtiers looked everywhere for the slave, but unfortunately, they could not find him anywhere. The butler and the serving ladies got ready to go look for him in the garden. When it got dark, Olivia was amazed at their initiative. She began to think that the slave could have died through her fault, and that she should not have listened to the doctor, but immediately set him free for his sake, and for her own sake. The Duchess ran out into the garden and rushed to the pond. An exhausted slave lay near the shore. He had no strength. She realized that the slave had been in the room all day long, so that he could only see the park outside the window. So he broke the window and jumped out and ran to look for water. Her goal was to educate him, but she realized that she had made a mistake by depriving him of water and food, because in education, strict measures are needed when there is no threat to life. The slave was very light and thin. Olivia did not give anyone a second chance, but she gave him not only a second, but even a third. The guy opened his eyes in the evening of the second day and climbed onto the cabinet again. The Duchess was brought dinner, and she waited for the slave to come down. When he saw the food, he attacked her, licking the entire plate. Olivia tried to explain to the guy that food is taken while sitting at the table and not on it. But he did not listen, but jumped onto the bed under the blanket. The girl had a long way to learn. Then the slave spoke. Why did he say about hatch 3? She thought that he was not talking about his name, but about some object. But the girl was interested in knowing his name. He didn't know his name. He was captured when he was little. There was no other name. No one was ever interested in the slave's name. Olivia came up with a name for him. She called him Caleb, but gave him the right to choose a different name if he didn't like it. Her surprise was that the slave said his name, but it turned out that this was payment for the bed. The most important thing in this case is that he can talk. Caleb believed that this was worth a lot, since no one had been able to get him to talk before. Olivia ordered him that if she saw him eating on the table again, then instead of soup, she would eat plain water, and that her bed, only hers, she allowed him to sleep there while he was sick, and now he should go to the room prepared for him. The guy pretended that he didn't hear her, turned around and went to bed. The Duchess was angry that she was being ignored, but then she cooled down and lay down next to her. She had not felt the breathing of a person next to her in bed for a very long time. She began to think that he was no longer a child, but then she stopped her thoughts. Perhaps the presence of a name influenced him. The servants began to treat him as a member of the family, although not everyone was of this opinion, and the reason was obvious. The guy was a prisoner. Olivia tried to get Caleb to put on his shoes, but he refused to do so, since he had always been barefoot before. The reason for his reluctance was found out. The guy never wore shoes because he was a slave, but the Duchess tried to explain to him that he was no longer a slave. She burned his documents. The Duchess took and put on his shoes herself and said that if he wanted to live here, he would have to wear shoes. Caleb had to come to terms with this. The guy no longer caused disturbances. He soon became more obedient, did not run away as before, and did not show hostility when he was in the same room with people. The girl liked spending time with him, especially since she had not lived with someone for a long time. Olivia became very attached to Caleb. However, those who were avoiding the guy appeared in the mansion. They said that he looks quite smart, so he knows who to stay close to. Olivia couldn't understand what was going on in his head. Caleb constantly looked out the window and spent his time doing nothing. When the girl suggested that he go outside, the guy was very surprised. He didn't know what was possible, but Olivia reminded him that he was not a slave and was not in captivity, so he could go wherever he wanted. The Duchess remembered that it had happened before. Caleb usually does what you tell him if necessary, but if you ask him to make a choice, confusion immediately appears on his face. So in the end, he does nothing. Under the pretext of walks, Olivia began to take Caleb with her everywhere. At first, he was somehow lost, but he quickly got used to it and began to respond to what was interesting to him. The new resident of the mansion was not particularly interested in the brightly decorated rooms, but really liked the greenhouses and garden. She assumed that the Karens lived in large groups in the forest. Faith Young arrived at the estate to check on his condition, but Caleb bared his teeth at her and did not let her near him. When the doctor tried to examine him again, he pushed her away, climbed onto the cabinet, and said that he did not trust doctors. Olivia began to shout at him that it was Faith Young who cured him and that he should come down. Surprisingly, the guy listened and came down. The doctor said that she had found a suitable place for Caleb. All he had to do was say when he could arrive and everything would be prepared. The Duchess had already forgotten that she asked to find a place for him because she was already so accustomed to him. But on the other hand, for his own sake, it is worth sending Caleb to where he will be better. You cannot live under protection all the time. It is worth being independent. Faith Young examined the guy. There were no external problems. He ate well and all his organs were in order, and now he can drive safely. Caleb bared his teeth again. He was angry. The guy didn't want to go to the shelter, and he jumped straight out onto the terrace and disappeared into the garden. Olivia saw the doctor off and went to her room to rest, her head spinning. Having rested a little, she still went to look for Caleb. He was found at the very top of the tree. The guy climbed there on purpose so that he would not be found and left alone. The Duchess said that if he wanted to avoid being found, then he should have run away from the estate. The guy said touchingly that if she wanted him to get away, then she shouldn't have saved him. Olivia was still interested in knowing his age, but Caleb didn't know for sure. Offhand, he was 22 years old. The girl asked if he would like to live with people like him, because the doctor found him a good shelter. But Caleb believed that there were no good places for him, since citizenship did not make any sense. He could be caught in the capital and sold in the provinces. Any of the places not safe for him. After the offer to stay at the estate, Caleb thought about it. He didn't really want to stay anywhere. He didn't want to be thrown from place to place like some kind of bag. Olivia is not guilty of anything in front of Caleb. On the contrary, he considers her his savior. And despite this, Olivia cannot get rid of some nagging feeling. After thinking, she told him that if he wanted, he could stay. But on the condition that he obeyed her, everyone on the estate obeys her. But they are not her slaves. The Duchess sat and drank tea. The maid asked if Caleb would return. She did not know. Everything depended on his decision. A guy burst through the window and returned. The next day, the girl said her name, but Caleb thought her name was Your Highness, since everyone called her that. When Olivia returned, she found the guy reading a book. She looked at him and thought there was something noble and sublime about him that did not fit in with the image of a child. Every time at such moments she remembered the cat warming itself in front of the fireplace on a cold winter evening. After Caleb decided to stay in the mansion, they never showed any dissatisfaction with their new life, although they once quarreled when their opinions were divided. The guy was dissatisfied with the shorts. He believed that children wore them, but he was not a child at all. Caleb attacked Olivia. He was angry that she considered him a child, but the Duchess was a rather strong girl. She knocked him down and ordered him to never treat her like that, calling a tailor and asking the girl to sew new clothes for the guy. After this incident, Caleb never attacked the Duchess again. Olivia had a headache due to the problems of raising a guy. At first, she was going to hire a professional teacher, but her high position did not allow this. Olivia Ellington used to be a princess and was now a duchess. In her circle, there were only aristocrats, and all her familiar teachers were also from noble families. Despite the princess's orders, they were still aristocrats from birth, and in no case would they have endured such humiliation as raising a prisoner. Caleb had unusual abilities. In 30 minutes, he learned the alphabet, and in half a day, he learned to read. Teaching such a student who quickly grasps everything was very pleasant. The guy was walking along the corridor of the mansion, and a servant of the Duchess came across him in the dark. A maid immediately jumped out and attacked the man, screaming, demanding to apologize to the guy. Having moved away from Caleb, the subjects began to whisper about him. They did not understand why the Duchess treated this slave so well, and they would have to endure him further. Hearing this gossip, Caleb asked Olivia how long he would be here, but she did not hold him. The guy could leave at any time as he wished. Olivia believed that Caleb was much more obedient than before because she had tamed him, and perhaps because he had decided not to resist her anymore. The Duchess asked to bring books from the library. On the way, the guy met a man he had never known before, who was outraged that a slave was walking along the corridor. The man turned out to be a knight hired by Olivia. He was immediately told that he was not a slave, but a child being raised by Her Highness. He was extremely indignant, not understanding why she needed a pet. Did she really not have enough lovers? Caleb felt that contemptuous look on him again. Out of anger, he threw the books on the floor and bared his teeth. The man swung his cane and hit the guy, causing him to bleed from the blow. The man ordered that this vile slave be thrown out immediately. Caleb bared his teeth at him. He became even more enraged, swung to kick the guy, but the latter grouped himself and kicked the man in the chin. The Duchess's servant began to call the doctor for help, and the knight demanded that the boy be caught immediately. Olivia was in her bedroom. She decided to take a break from work and teaching Caleb. A prisoner burst into her room. He climbed onto the table with his shoes on. The Duchess was outraged by this act, and on top of that, he came without the books she asked for. Caleb approached her face and asked her to leave here together. He asked to leave because someone was looking for Olivia, and it seemed to the guy that they wanted to harm her. At that moment, she saw a wound on his forehead. Sir Elliot burst into the Duchess's room with an angry man. Her Highness began to explain to Sir that no one should be allowed into the mansion without permission. The gentleman turned all attention to himself. He said that he had every right to enter this house because it was his own house. He was the husband of the Duchess, and not a new knight. Olivia swung her hand and slapped the man. Putting the sword to his neck, she said that this insult to royalty was punishable by death. The gentleman began to shout that His Majesty is aware that he came here, especially since he is still the husband of the Duchess. He did not leave a stamp on the divorce paper and is still a member of the royal family. The Duchess was cool. She whispered to the man that the day she sent him the divorce letter, their relationship ended and there was no point in his seal. Olivia threatened to cut off her husband's finger, but the threats did not frighten him. He was not going to retreat back and did not accept her decision to divorce. Her Highness warned that if he touched anything in her house again, she would cut off not just his finger, but all his limbs and bury them in a pigsty. Olivia looked at her ex-husband Raymond with a deep sense of contempt, but he could not say a word. All he could do was pull out a box with difficulty and place it on the table with a crash. He disappeared as quickly as if he was trying to escape. There was no need to look at what was there. Most likely it was a letter of divorce without a stamp. The Duchess warned Sir Elliot that if such an incident happened one more time, she would pull the sword not from its sheath, but from his throat. The girl called Caleb and he followed her. She began to treat his wound, anointing it. The wound healed very quickly. Caleb did not know that the Duchess had a husband, but she reassured him that there was no need to worry about this. They had not lived as spouses for a long time, but the guy then did not understand why the lady married him. Olivia had heard that captives, depending on their lineage, lived with one partner for their entire lives, which was why Caleb was interested in knowing why she didn't marry for love. The Duchess explained that among those who wooed her, he was the poorest, and her mother chose Raymond because she believed that if Olivia had an insolvent man next to her, she would come to her senses to control him. For a moment, Olivia's expression seemed incredibly devastated. Her mother wanted the girl to dress brightly, wear dresses and dance at balls, think about hairstyles and children like other girls. Olivia loved swords since childhood. She defeated her brother at the age of 7. If there was a chance to demonstrate her skills, she did not miss it. And besides, she had power because she had friendly relations with the knights. However, to her mother it seemed like a plan to seize the throne with the help of an army. To restore her reputation, Olivia needed to divorce Raymond and marry someone else. But divorce was impossible, as it required the permission of the emperor. But the latter was against it. If Olivia really had ambitions for the throne, she would have divorced Raymond and expressed her intention to marry again to someone who had power. Then influential aristocrats would have followed her, and the girl would have filed for divorce after becoming empress. The Duchess did not want all this. If she lost, she could either be sent into exile or killed, and if she won, she would have to live her whole life with caution. Fortunately, in the event of the death of the current emperor, a divorce can be obtained without his seal, so as soon as her parents died, she immediately wrote a letter of divorce. She sent it to Raymond a long time ago. He behaved quite quietly, and then it fell out of the blue. The Duchess could not even think that he would arrange such a thing. The current ruler of the empire was not on the side of his sister, but rather Raymond. He was of the same opinion as his parents, and considered Olivia just an eccentric girl who did not want to listen to her husband. And Raymond, in his eyes, looked like a poor husband who had a hard time because of his selfish and rude wife. In general, this was their situation. Caleb didn't know what to say. The Duchess asked him if, when he told her that she needed to run away, he really wanted to protect her from Raymond. The guy remembered his past and said that those who break into a house cannot have good intentions. The Duchess explained that those who want to harm her usually do not come through the front door. They either climb over the fence, or break windows, or secretly put poison in food. She assured Caleb that he had nothing to worry about as she would take care of his safety. The guy got angry. He didn't mean it, but on the contrary, he was afraid for Olivia. Olivia admitted that Caleb was fast and agile, however. He was kidnapped 4 times, no matter how hard he tried to escape. The guy remained silent and headed towards the exit of the room. The Duchess asked where he was. The prisoner said offendedly that because of her husband, he had scattered the books, and they should be collected. She was angry at his words. She did not want anything to connect the girl with Raymond. When Caleb left, Olivia thought, she couldn't believe he was 20 years old. He acted like a child. He never liked the fact that he still hadn't grown up, but something had changed since he arrived at the estate. Caleb decided that if Raymond came here again, he would make Olivia regret her words. The Duchess took the guy with her to the city. She invited him to go somewhere, but he was at a loss. After Raymond caused chaos at the estate, neither Olivia nor Caleb ever mentioned his name. The Duchess's husband himself, whose finger had almost been cut off, did not appear again. And Caleb, who was expecting his visit for various reasons, had to forget about everything because of his studies. Her Highness handed the guy a piece of paper with text and asked him to memorize it. It contained Louise's address. Louise was one of the few former captives who received citizenship, and she ran an orphanage where she helped other captives who had nowhere to go. The Duchess offered to go out into the city together. At the same time, she would show where Louise's house was and teach her how to look for addresses. After Olivia asked if he wanted to go somewhere, Caleb did not know what to answer, since he did not know the places to go. As soon as they got into the carriage, the Duchess felt that the guy was not interested in anything. Either he had such an indifferent character, or it was because of the conditions in which he grew up. Whatever it was, she could not force him. Olivia ordered to follow her and look around. At the same time, she will show how to look for a house by address. Caleb felt as if someone was watching him. He collided with a woman, and the cap flew off his head. The guy immediately began to hide his ears, afraid of being noticed. The old woman began to apologize for not seeing him due to poor eyesight. Caleb grabbed his cap and pulled it on his head. It seemed that passers-by did not pay attention to his ears. Olivia found the right address where the best canes were sold, but discovered that the child was missing. A few seconds later, Caleb ran up. He was pale and sweat poured into 3 streams. The Duchess suggested returning back early if he felt uncomfortable in such a crowded place. Entering the cane store, they were met by the owner of the store. He was extremely amazed that Her Highness herself visited the store. The owner suggested going upstairs. He would show everything the Duchess needed. Caleb said he would stay downstairs and look at the canes. The shop owner produced a cane that he thought would be perfect for the Duchess. Initially, his workshop did not produce this kind of cane, but after an important person placed an order several years ago, he did some research. It was not just a cane, but a sword. This cane is ideal for someone who is fluent with a sword. Although this is a very interesting thing, the Duchess now had no love for swords, and the store owner offered to carve any cane for her. They heard some noise on the first floor. The window was broken. Everything was overturned. Caleb was nowhere to be found. It was raining heavily outside. Olivia rushed to look for the guy, but a few hours later she returned to the workshop with nothing. She immediately contacted the residents and mobilized more than 10 knights. By now, they had managed to turn the entire capital inside out. But the only information that could be obtained was that a certain lady had encountered Caleb. She offered to take him home, but he quickly disappeared from sight. Olivia would be glad if they couldn't find the guy just because he was well hidden. But something could have happened to him. There were only 2 places known to Caleb, the Duke's residence and Louise's house. The Duchess was about to look for the guy along with the knights, when one of the knights brought an unknown man into the workshop. She grabbed the stranger and demanded to know where he was, the child's grandfather. He was silent and had no intention of saying anything. Olivia hit him with such force that the man began to bleed. The stranger immediately became more accommodating. He said that he did not know that the guy had an owner. He was ordered, and he grabbed him. But the child ran away. Her Highness ordered to seize all the accomplices, leaving no one out and not caring about their limbs. The main thing was that the tongue was intact. Olivia went in search of Caleb, trying to figure out where he could be heading. The last possible place was a park. Caleb had a habit of climbing onto something high in case of danger. She found a place from where she could see the ducal coat of arms on the carriage returning to the residence. Caleb was sleeping at the top of the tree, Olivia called him, asking him to come down and go home. She assured him that the bastards who wanted to take him were captured, and now he was safe. Caleb said he would never be safe because he was born this way, and no matter where he was, it would be the same. Olivia realized that when Caleb decided to stay at her house, he avoided crowded places from the very beginning, but she still dragged him into the city with her, believing that nothing would happen near her. The guy tried to reassure the Duchess that it was not her fault in what happened, because slaves are just goods, and no one cares whether they have a family, citizenship, or owner. Only money is important here. Therefore, those who buy slaves keep them in a dungeon without windows or doors until they grow up, so that no one can steal the goods. However, Caleb did not grow up, and therefore even if he goes to Louise's house, nothing will change, and for the rest of his days he will vegetate inside her home, unable to leave. The guy admitted that every time he ran away, he thought about where to hide away. But this time he thought about the Duchess's house. She told him that there was nothing wrong with having a place to come back to, and he could come or go whenever he wanted. Caleb didn't want to leave, but Olivia wasn't going to pursue him. But if something happened to her, he had to find his own path in life. The guy was angry. He was not going to live without the Duchess, and if she dies in her mansion, then he wants to be buried next to her. Olivia remembered the doctor's words that the Karai tribe lives by instinct, and until they meet their partner, they remain in their child form. But after growing up, they forever remain close to their chosen one and die together. It was important for Caleb to know if he could rely on Olivia. She pretended not to hear his question and asked him to return home. Olivia tried to explain to Caleb that one day his body will grow. It will happen when he meets his mate, and in that case, this girl will become his family. He came down from the tree and decided to go to the residence with the Duchess. As soon as they got into the carriage, Caleb immediately fell asleep. Arriving at the mansion, Olivia began to wake him up and discovered that the guy had a high fever. Taking Caleb in her arms, she ordered the butler to immediately call a doctor. After the news of Caleb's disappearance, the servants' moods were chaotic all day. So seeing his condition, the people in the mansion could not hide their mixed feelings. No one could say what kind of illness had overtaken him. First, they decided to bring down his temperature. Olivia sat next to Caleb's bed all night. He was delirious until the morning. Despite all the medications prescribed by the doctor, for some reason the guy's condition continued to rapidly deteriorate. And when the clock hand passed midnight, he howled in pain. An endless, vicious circle. The child regains consciousness for a moment, looks ahead, then plunges into darkness again. Although a lot of time has passed, there has been no news from the person sent to Faith Young. Meanwhile, Caleb's fever was getting stronger. Every time he touched his body, it was like touching a hot iron. Olivia was furious. The medications didn't help. The doctor couldn't do anything. He just stood there and just threw up his hands. The doctor told the Duchess that even if the fever subsided, the child might never be able to speak again or even become an idiot. In some cases, causing a paralyzing disability. It was difficult to say for sure. Her Highness blamed herself for everything because she was the one who dragged the child into the city, who did not want to go anywhere. And once she was with him outside the residence, she could not really protect him. Olivia decided to tell Caleb a story from her life. How once as a child she went to the market. Before we never went outside the imperial palace. There was fun and food all around. The princess liked that the atmosphere was completely different from that of a social event. A stray cat followed Olivia. She was about to pass by, but her friend took the cat to a deserted alley and shared with him the food she had with her. While feeding, a friend said that she was very worried about the cat because he could get sick or die of hunger if left unattended. Then the princess said that she would take him with her. She did not want to look bad in the eyes of her only friend. That cat's name was Caleb. With his appearance, a friend began to come to Olivia more often, and when she was not there, it became less the same because the cat was nearby. However, after about a year, Caleb began to refuse food. The princess thought that he had no appetite due to the heat outside, so she took him with her to the dinner table, since the cat was always interested in human food. The girl crumbled some bread, and as expected, he ate everything to the last crumb, and so the cat died. Since then, Olivia is no longer able to hug tiny creatures, be it a kitten, puppy, or baby, because there was poison in the bread. Then the maid told the princess that the cat was aware of the kindness shown to him, so for a roof over his head, he saved her by sacrificing his life. Olivia apologized to Caleb for giving him that name. Bending over the guy, the Duchess promised him to fulfill his last wish, and if he died, then to bury him in the mansion. She leaned towards his lips and said that she would never leave him. So if there is a desire to live, let him be calm about this, and finally comes to his senses. Taking his hand, Olivia fell asleep next to him. The next morning, Caleb woke up. The Duchess was lying next to him, holding his hand. He did not understand what was happening, but besides all this, he felt strange sensations. Seeing his reflection in the window, he was amazed by what he saw. The guy was no longer a child, but a man. At that moment, the Duchess woke up. Seeing a stranger next to her, she immediately grabbed the cane, pressed him to the floor with the cane, and began asking where he was doing with Caleb. He said that was Caleb. Olivia didn't understand what the catch was, but the stranger's eyes really looked like Caleb's. Someone outside the door announced that Miss Faith Young had arrived. The Duchess was distracted, and the man snatched the cane from her hands, taking advantage of the moment. Faith Young and the butler entered the room and froze at what they saw. The doctor immediately realized it was Caleb. At this moment, Olivia remembered something. A slave only goes through puberty when he finds his soulmate. After examining Caleb, the doctor concluded that there were no problems with the body, and the fever had also subsided. There was silence in the room. Faith Young decided that it was time for her to leave. Otherwise, the awkwardness would continue. The Duchess called the doctor to talk. She needed to know how this could even happen, but Faith Young was just as amazed as the Duchess. Olivia couldn't believe it. She even suggested that the stranger had kidnapped Caleb, and this was an adult man very similar to him. But the doctor cut her off, because the guy had the same scars on his back. Faith Young told the Duchess that although the matter had taken an unexpected turn, she was not obliged to continue to bear responsibility for the guy, since it was not Olivia's fault that he fell in love with her. After Raymond's confession of love, this was the second time she had heard something so terrifying. The woman asked if Olivia didn't like being loved so much. But that was not the point. Until today, he was just a little boy. Faith Young reiterated that she didn't have to bear responsibility for what happened. The ears and tail disappeared, so now he is no different from a person. And seeing how he pinned the Duchess with one left hand, he has a lot of strength. The woman said that even if she left Caleb naked in the middle of the central square, no one would think of kidnapping him. She believed that by dating a man out of pity, a woman only makes things worse for herself. Olivia began to look for excuses. Maybe it wasn't her fault at all, but there was severe stress. Although it is rare, there have been cases of Karen slaves who, on the brink of life and death, unexpectedly matured before meeting their soulmate, Faith Young said. Olivia jumped up and shouted that the boy had recently been shocked after an incident with a failed kidnapping. Where did the love fever come from? The doctor suggested asking Caleb himself, and then the Duchess would find answers to all her questions. Olivia decided that she shouldn't avoid the person with whom she lives under the same roof, and as if nothing had happened, she returned to Caleb. She was irritated by the scraping of cutlery on her plate, but she sat unperturbed. Nevertheless, in comparison with what he was like as a child, progress was clearly visible. One way or another, Caleb learns quite quickly. Although apart from the clattering of dishes, his overall appearance is quite good. Caleb showed himself quite well until yesterday, but today every movement of his hands shines through with grace. Perhaps this is because movements that were difficult due to the short length of his arms are now much easier for him. Realizing this fact, the Duchess felt that Caleb became a little more alien and distant. Even if she looked at him with all her eyes, she would be hard-pressed to find anything that reminded her of the old Caleb. Looking at him, Olivia's stomach sank. She decided to finish the meal first and got up from the table. Heading towards the exit, Caleb stopped her, taking her hand. Olivia snatched her hand away and told him to continue eating dinner while she went upstairs. While taking a bath, she thought that she could not calm her agitated heart. Last night, Olivia prepared herself for whatever could happen to Caleb. No matter the outcome, she was determined to do her duty to her boyfriend. However, Caleb did not die or become incapacitated. He simply grew up, choosing his other half, with whom he is ready to stay close for the rest of his life. Now Caleb is healthy and has the body he wanted. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say it's a happy ending. However, she did not understand why she was dismayed at the mere thought of having to face him again. Olivia knew full well that she couldn't avoid Caleb all the time. She mocked both herself and the guy, trying to look in him for at least something reminiscent of the child he was. She reproached herself for the fact that she was neither an intelligent guardian nor a reliable defender. The Duchess could not sleep, and with a heavy heart she went out for a walk in the garden, but the fresh air did not put her thoughts in order. Olivia heard the sound of someone's footsteps. There shouldn't be anyone in the garden at such a late hour. A giant wild beast appeared from the bushes. The Duchess had already come to terms with the idea that she was about to die from its paws. She wanted to run away, but her legs wouldn't obey her and she couldn't even stand up. The beast sat down opposite her. As he laid his head in her lap, the Duchess realized that it was Caleb. The fur that covered his entire body was so black that it seemed to have absorbed all the darkness of the night, but at the same time silky and shiny. Olivia asked him if he was able to change his appearance in this way because he became an adult, and if he could do anything else. The beast shook his head. The Duchess didn't understand. This means that he can't do anything else, or he doesn't know yet. She laughed. The idea came to her to ride on a beast, like in one children's fairy tale. Caleb frowned, but Olivia explained to him that it wasn't that she was going to treat him like a horse. It was just that such a story accidentally popped up in her head. She decided to take him for a show-off and said that she was not sure that he was strong enough to carry a person on his back. The beast invited the Duchess to sit on his back. With childish happiness in her eyes, she climbed onto his back. Olivia felt like she was in a fairy tale from childhood. Just as she was about to get down, Caleb ran as fast as he could, ignoring her scream. Caleb brought her to the depths of the forest bowl of the residence's garden. The Duchess never came here. From a beast, the guy became a man again and kissed Olivia. They kissed for a long time under the cover of darkness, in the moonlight and surrounded by fireflies. After the kiss, Olivia didn't say a word. She just looked thoughtfully and thought about what she had just done. Caleb didn't know what her expression meant or whether she regretted what happened. Finally, she turned to the guy and asked him to take him to the residence to her room. Once in the room, the Duchess thanked the beast and the latter lay down next to her bed. While stroking his head, the Duchess decided to tell him that since he had grown so big, he no longer needed her help. Caleb bared his teeth. He was angry. Olivia immediately corrected herself. She meant that now it was unlikely that any threat could harm him. Before she had time to finish speaking, the beast again took on human form. The guy took her hand, but the Duchess stopped him and asked him to get dressed before they talked. When he got dressed and returned, she could not take her eyes off him, and it seemed to her that everything that was happening was not true. Olivia had many questions. One of them was how he managed to transform from a man into a beast and vice versa. But Caleb himself did not know the answer to this question. The Duchess was worried about what he would do now, because as an adult, he can live peacefully, even alone, and can now go anywhere. Caleb looked at her and pretended he didn't understand the question. Olivia hoped she had it all wrong, because she was completely unsuited to be the other half of Caleb's heart. He decided that the Duchess was saying all this on purpose, since he was not suitable for her. Olivia began to reassure him that this was not so at all. After Caleb changed, people continued to cast glances in his direction. Apparently, the problem was not with his ears and tail. He drooped. It seemed to him that the reason lay in something else. The Duchess admitted to him that everyone was looking at him because he was beautiful, and they were making circles because they wanted to talk to him. Even when Caleb was a child, he always attracted the attention of other people, and now such a beautiful child has grown up and become a wonderful young man. So it's unlikely that anyone can resist looking in his direction. The guy had shiny hair, silky skin, long and thin fingers, well-defined facial lines, and thick eyebrows above golden eyes like precious stones. He didn't believe Olivia. He believed that everyone, including her, thought he was terrible and scary. Caleb was angry. He didn't understand whether this was the first time a man had confessed his feelings to the Duchess and why she was trying to deny this fact with her entire body. Putting her hand on the guy, she said that a fleeting romance is not a problem, but a lifelong union is not an easy matter. Olivia didn't think she was the best person to spend her life with so Caleb could live his life better. The Duchess tried to convey to the guy that she was not his match. Caleb finally gave in and said he understood. He felt like he had crossed a line. He believed that he was not worth wasting his whole life on, and the Duchess chose him because the guy's appearance was pitiful. And yet, in case of refusal, Caleb wanted the reason to lie in the lack of sympathy for him, and not in the fact that he was a beastman. Olivia stopped Caleb and began to explain that the point is not that he is a beastman, but that before her eyes, the same 12-year-old boy is still there. The situation reminded the Duchess of the plot of a children's fairy tale, a small animal with which she lived all this time, as if by magic, becomes a beautiful young man. It would be better if they didn't know each other, but until yesterday she raised him like a child. Olivia was already hysterical. She said that Caleb should date someone who would be ready to take responsibility, namely his love for life. All this time, the guy listened carefully to the Duchess. Then he took her and kissed her sharply. He threw her onto the bed without stopping kissing her. Olivia didn't even resist. For her, it was such an indecent kiss, because no one had ever kissed her like that. She was amazed at how he kissed, since he had never kissed anyone before her. For a moment, Olivia stopped him, saying that he was only attracted to her because she saved him, and if Caleb had been a noble representative of the aristocracy, would he have liked her? Caleb rephrased her question. If he were a noble member of an aristocratic family, Olivia would think so hard about their relationship. The Duchess could not guarantee a lifelong relationship if they reunited. Caleb got angry because he thought Olivia thought he was a one-night stand. He surprised her. It turns out that people are mistaken about something, and people like Caleb also break up. There was only one change for him. If Caleb was here, he could think about Olivia while he was nearby. But if he left, he would have to do it from a distance. This is what she was worried about, as it seemed to the Duchess that instead of suffering from the passion that had arisen unilaterally, it was better to meet someone who would share his feelings. But Caleb had already made his final decision and did not want to hear anything like that from him. He grabbed Olivia's face and said that if his decision really ruined his life, then he would do it with his own hands, and the Duchess did not need to be responsible for his choice. The guy was interested in how Her Highness dealt with all the numerous men. Everything was simple for her. If there was a spark, then she slept with them. If not, then she gave up. Caleb allowed her to do the same to him. All Olivia has to do is say something and the guy will leave immediately, even if he has to do it right now. Olivia didn't answer, and Caleb didn't have to wait for her answer, because the two were lost in their own world, listening to each other's breathing. After what happened last night, Olivia thought for a long time and finally made a decision. To begin with, stay in bed. The fact that Olivia was chained to the bed after Caleb caused unrest among the servants, who began to whisper about the outbreak of an epidemic due to Caleb, who had become infected the other day. Frightened by these rumors, her attending physician arrived at the Duchess's chambers to conduct an examination. In the end, he helped Her Highness hide her feigning illness by informing all the servants that she was slightly overworked. She was glad that she could be alone for a while. Caleb came into her room and asked her to look after the Duchess while she was sick, and now they were lying in the same bed with him. Olivia pretended to be sick because she was uncomfortable seeing Caleb, but in the end, he, on the contrary, did not leave her side all day. No matter how much she clicked her tongue, saying that only unscrupulous fools would get drunk and sleep with a stranger, her actions last night were 100 times worse. Even though the Duchess wasn't completely drunk, and it wasn't a stranger lying next to her, the excuse she came up with was truly absurd. Even though they spent the night together, they didn't do anything special. They just fell asleep, cuddling like they were in some kind of children's game. They kissed a few times during the process, but nothing really serious happened. Olivia asked Caleb to get up for a moment and go eat, but he refused. She was angry because it was because of him that she pretended to be sick. It seemed that that night, when they kissed several times, Olivia was the only one who was endlessly nervous and rushing from side to side. Caleb was only concerned about her lying in bed and never once mentioned what had happened earlier. Therefore, he did not rush the Duchess to answer what she intended to do with him in the future, and also did not ask whether she now saw him as a man. A string of these thoughts filled only Olivia's head, so she herself must put the finishing touch on the canvas. But Her Highness was not yet ready to give an answer. The commander of the Knightly Order, Kyle, knocked on the room. He had an urgent report. Those they caught were a group of ordinary mercenaries who hunt for runaway slaves. and the one who buys these slaves is the Calton trading house. The Duchess did not understand how simply a mercenary could, with one glance at a slave wandering alone, immediately understand whether he had run away or was carrying out an errand on the orders of his master. While wandering around the surrounding area in search of runaway slaves, they first catch everyone they meet on the way. And if after the capture a problem arises, the mercenaries immediately make excuses, thinking that it is a runaway slave. However, they decided to carry out such a scheme not somewhere on the periphery, but right in the capital, even despite the fact that they saw Her Highness with Caleb. They said that one of the representatives of the nobility provided them with patronage. The commander could not say who it was, but judging by the rumors and circumstances, it could be one of the dukes. Unlike Olivia, who received the title of Grand Duchess, but is known only for being the younger sister of the emperor, each of the three ducal families who shared the rise and fall of the empire wields enormous real power. The Duchess was interested in the size of the Calton trading house. Since aristocrats were his main client base, he had extensive connections, and the level of his financial support could not be ignored. No one in this area was able to get along with him. Olivia thought about ordering their arrest, but there was no excuse since they had not broken the law. Her Highness could order the knightly order to act, use Caleb as an excuse. But now that nothing has happened, if Olivia visits the Calton trading house with the knights, they will immediately blame it on the mercenaries who committed the kidnapping attempt. Moreover, before she tries to do anything about the trading house, she will obviously begin to be put under pressure from the ducal family and other nobles who are its patrons. If the Duchess begins to conflict with one of the ducal families, then there is no doubt that the emperor will sit idly by. To use the knightly order, it is necessary to voice a pretext that can convince the emperor, but Olivia did not know if it even existed. Her Highness understood that having eradicated the House of Calton, other houses would appear after it, because the slave trade was legalized in the empire. The most important thing was that she did not have the right to vote. Having the title of Grand Duchess, she would be able to play the role of advisor to the emperor. However, the rule prescribed to her was not to interfere in politics. The Duchess released the commander for a while. She needed time to think. Olivia didn't know what to do with the slave traders. If she didn't want to interfere, she could just kill the guy in the dungeon and be done with it. But considering what Caleb had been through, she wanted to at least kick them out of the capital. Her Highness thought it best not to tell Caleb that she had captured the slave hunter, as it might have further aggravated his trauma. Olivia went into Caleb's room. He was reading textbooks to kill time. Now that he was such a big boy, he didn't need supervision while he was learning. Caleb extended his hand to Olivia and pulled her towards him, sitting her on his lap. She began to playfully swear at him that no one dared to do that to her. He pulled her even closer and kissed her. Although Caleb was not bad at kissing, Olivia resisted because she was afraid that someone might notice them. The guy reassured her that if someone came, he would warn her. Olivia urgently needed to correct the fact that she was unable to resist his temptation. Having gathered her thoughts, she nevertheless decided to tell him everything about the hunter who tried to catch him. The hunter was in the underground dungeon of the mansion. The Duchess found out what organization he belonged to. It would have been easier to kill him, but she wanted to know Caleb's thoughts on this matter. The guy didn't understand why she was telling him all this. Olivia explained that if she killed him, then that would be the end of it. And if she continued to act, then, at best, she would only destroy the small group of mercenaries to which he belonged. She could not catch all the human slave traders. Because this would require changing the law, Olivia was unable to do this. There were few people on her side, and many new enemies could appear, and punishing the mercenaries was her personal revenge, which she could handle on her own. The Duchess promised Caleb that if he did express such a desire, she would try to figure out a way to do it. At that very second, she realized that she had blurted out something stupid, because with her words, she was driving herself into a corner. Caleb asked to take care of all this to the extent that Olivia would not cause any problems. She took his hand and assured him that there was no need to worry about her. She would rather say what his heart wanted. First of all, he wanted to put behind bars everyone who bought and sold slaves, then drug them until every nerve cell is destroyed, and then stop drugging them. Afterwards, throw them a single knife, saying that they will give them drugs for the cut-off finger. Caleb would continue until they were left without arms and legs. Then he would throw their bodies into the fire to burn alive. Even this guy was not disgusting to the Duchess. He asked her if she could get rid of the group. Olivia grabbed his face and told him that if he wanted it that way, she would do it. Caleb wished to get rid of the group, hoping that this action would save at least one beastman like him. Her Highness had one more question. If suddenly the nobleman of a Paladin was in the hands of the guy, but it was not known whether he traded in slaves or not, then Caleb would want to kill him. He kissed Olivia's hand and said that when he found out that she was from a Paladin, he decided to stay in the mansion to kill her. The Duchess withdrew her hand. Caleb laughed. It was a joke, since he decided to stay while he was a child. The reason he stayed was because Olivia had no interest in him. Being in the mansion, he felt like an ordinary person, unlike his past, where every onlooker wanted to benefit. Although Caleb was irritated by the Duchess's selfishness and hypocritical concern, she was the only person who constantly asked what he intended to do in the future. His point was that when you are with someone who promises to prepare you for the future, you begin to think that your future is inextricably linked with this person. It seemed to Caleb that everything should be exactly like this, but Olivia had much more experience and knew better. Of course, if you count the number of people Olivia dated before Caleb arrived, he was very far from her. But no one ever suggested that the Duchess prepare for a future together. The reason was that what future could there be for the Grand Duchess, who did not appear in secular society and did not participate in the formation of state policy, and also had a problematic husband around her neck? The only benefit that could be gained from marrying Olivia, who only had a high-profile title, was that her husband or child would be listed in the pedigree of the imperial family. However, in the current situation, where the imperial power is strong and the three ducal houses keep each other in check, the likelihood of Olivia's child ascending the throne is lower than the likelihood of a meteorite falling from the sky. So the only thing a man who married Olivia could get was minor honor. Caleb was the first to be truly sincere, and this made the Duchess hesitate. She really wanted to kiss him on the cheek, and she took it and did it. The guy was amazed at such initiative. She joked about her action, saying that all family members have the right to kiss each other on the cheek as praise, which she did. Despite all this, Olivia could not shake the feeling that she was playing daughter mother. Following her promise to Caleb, Olivia destroyed the mercenary group. However, it was impossible to imprison an entire group for trafficking in people from another state without trial, so they had to be accused of stealing the property of the imperial family. By treating Caleb as property, they were held responsible for stealing the Grand Duchess's property. The judge informed the Duchess that the beast man belonging to her was neither an infant nor a child. He did not have imperial citizenship, and therefore did not fall under any article of the law. However, the punishment for theft against the imperial family is much harsher than for kidnapping commoners, so Olivia could only benefit. In the first case, it was about death and the deprivation of a hand as a warning to others, and in the second, about imprisonment for an indefinite period. Olivia was terribly angry that those who tried to kidnap Caleb would have to be charged with theft and not with causing harm to a person. The Duchess thought that he would be offended by hearing her words, but the guy was amused by the fact that he was property. Olivia couldn't tell if Caleb was actually amused by the fact that he was being treated like a thing, or if he was just pretending. Caleb was reassured by the fact that in any case these people would be punished, and he did not expect anything more. Olivia was worried that the fact that the guy was still in the residence meant that he couldn't leave this place because of her. He admitted that this was true. The Duchess believed that because he was confined within 4 walls because of her, Caleb might develop hatred towards her in his heart. The guy asked about Olivia's readiness to leave with him. Her Highness was taken by surprise by this question. The time spent together flew by so quickly that Olivia didn't even notice how they came to the river. Caleb began to take off his shoes. Since he decided to cross the river, the Duchess also decided to take off her shoes. But she didn't have time to do this when the guy grabbed her in his arms. Usually, Caleb couldn't be called an affectionate and sweet man even in a joke. He always had an indifferent expression on his face and a low voice. And besides, At times, he was not averse to playing on Olivia's nerves. Moreover, his sarcasm and gloating sometimes went so far that she began to wonder if he really had feelings for the Duchess, and without hesitation, he could do the first thing that came into his head, as, for example, now. But it also happens that from time to time, Caleb gives Olivia a tender look, or touches her tenderly and timidly. He touched her and asked to kiss her. Olivia simply pecked him on the lips and immediately pulled away. This was not what Caleb expected. The guy looked at Olivia and thought that from time to time, everything that was happening seemed to him bad to his imagination. Every night, Caleb thought that with the sunrise, everything would magically disappear. There were days when for a long time he could not bring himself to open his eyelids, because he was afraid that when he opened his eyes, he would see a cold, gray stone wall instead of wallpaper and a window. He again thought about what if today turns out to be his last, and tomorrow he really wakes up from a lingering sleep. Every day, Caleb feels like he's waking up inside a dream. If it's really a dream, then this time he won't be able to withstand such a blow. Olivia noticed that Caleb was lost in his thoughts. She decided to distract him and kissed him again. After the kiss, they decided it was time to go back. The trial of the imprisoned mercenaries ended very easily. In the process, Olivia rescued 2 imprisoned beastmen and handed them over to Faith Young. As a result of this, a rumor spread throughout the capital about the Grand Duchess's beastmen. Olivia thought she shouldn't have made such a fuss. However, Caleb could have been in their place, so she concluded that it was good that the rumors had spread. The Duchess asked her subject one thing so that rumors would not reach Caleb. Speaking of Caleb, Olivia wondered what he was doing at the moment. When Caleb felt like it, he was mildly nice. But the times he wasn't, it was time to get on Olivia's nerves. And unfortunately, today was truly the last straw. The Duchess was outraged. The guy bit all the doctors who came to him, and no one wanted to come anymore. Caleb believed that there was no need for a medical examination. He knew his body better than anyone. Olivia considered this childish logic because she could not constantly call Faith Young for examinations. The guy didn't like that he was constantly being groped and that the doctors smelled like medicine. Her Highness was furious with Caleb's behavior. He acted like a small child, and this irritated her even more. But Caleb could not be convinced. He believed that he did not need a medical examination because those like him were different from people and did not experience any ailments. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock on the door. Faith Young arrived, although the Duchess had previously agreed to meet with her, but at the moment her arrival was not on time.